Look around the room you're in right now. The phone in your hand, the shoes by the door, the coffee, the screen, the chair. Almost everything you can see spent part of its life inside the same object, a corrugated steel box, 8 feet wide, that you have probably never thought about for even 1 second. A truck driver from North Carolina. A single ship, a converted oil tanker, sailing in 1956 with 58 metal boxes on its deck. A cost that fell so far it stopped making sense, from nearly $6 a ton to 16 cents. Dock unions who swore to sink the whole idea. And whole cities, New York, London, that lost their waterfronts to a box, while others you'd never expect rose from nothing to rule global trade. This is not a story about a machine. It's the story of an idea so simple it sounds like nothing, and it did more to build the world you live in than most wars or revolutions. Stay with me, because by the end you'll see the invisible skeleton holding up your entire life. This is the box that made the modern world. Here's what this channel does. It hunts down the one object, the one idea, the one overlooked week that quietly rewired the whole economy, and shows you how. If that's your kind of history, subscribe now, and let's follow one man to the docks. Our story starts with a man named Malcom McLean, not an engineer, not a shipping magnate, a farmer's son from Maxton, North Carolina, who in 1935 bought one secondhand truck and started hauling other people's freight. He built McLean Trucking from that single truck into one of the largest trucking companies in America. He was, by every account, relentless, a man obsessed with cost, with waste, with the tiny inefficiencies everyone else accepted. And there was one inefficiency he could never stop thinking about. The story McLean liked to tell went back to the 1930s, to a day he spent parked at a dock in New Jersey, waiting to deliver a load of cotton bales. He watched longshoremen carry his cargo off the truck, piece by piece, and stack it by hand into the belly of a ship. It took forever, and he sat there thinking a very simple thought. Why unload the truck at all? Why not just lift the whole thing onto the ship? It sounds obvious. It sounds like nothing. But hold on to that thought, because that nothing was worth more than gold, and almost no one in the business could see it. They'd been loading ships the same way for 3,000 years. To them, the dock wasn't a problem to be solved. It was simply how the world worked. McLean saw a problem worth a fortune. He just had to bet everything he owned to prove it. By the early 1950s, McLean had refined the idea. Forget lifting whole trucks. That wasted space. Lift only the box. A container or crane could pluck off a truck chassis, drop onto a ship, and set back onto another truck 1,000 miles away, without a single hand ever touching what was inside. But there was a wall in his way. American regulations forbade one company from owning both a trucking line and a shipping line. So McLean made a decision that stunned everyone who knew him. He sold McLean Trucking, the company he had spent 20 years building, his life's work, and used the money to buy a struggling steamship company instead. He walked away from the empire he knew, to gamble on an industry he didn't, on a hunch nobody shared. He mortgaged the future to do it, borrowing heavily against ships that had never carried a single box. If he was wrong, he wasn't just broke. He was finished. On April 26, 1956, a converted World War II oil tanker called the Idealex pulled out of Newark, New Jersey, bound for Houston, Texas. On its reinforced deck sat 58 metal boxes. Not everyone watching from that pier wished it well. We'll get to them. But McLean already knew what the numbers were about to say. Here's the problem with that number: the cost of shipping something across the ocean. When you picture what makes freight expensive, you probably picture the ocean itself. The distance, the fuel, the endless miles of open water. And here's the thing almost nobody realized. The ocean was never the expensive part. The money didn't die at sea. It died sitting still at the dock. Before the box, every ship was loaded the way it had been for centuries. Barrels, sacks, crates, bales, thousands of separate items, each carried aboard by hand, by gangs of 20 or more longshoremen, and stacked into the hold like a giant, back-breaking puzzle. A single ship could spend as much time tied to the pier being loaded as it spent crossing the entire ocean. A week, sometimes more. And every hour of it cost money. Put a number on it. Loading loose cargo the old way cost about $5.86 a ton. Loading the same cargo inside a container? 16 cents a ton. That is not an improvement. It's a 36-fold collapse, the handling cost falling by something like 97%. By some estimates, the loading and unloading at the docks accounted for as much as 60 to 75% of the entire cost of shipping a good. The voyage was cheap. The waterfront was where the fortune was burning. Fill a box at the factory, seal it, and don't open it again until it reaches the store, and that whole waterfront army, and all its cost, simply vanishes. The ship stops for hours, not days. That was McLean's insight, and the Idealex proved it in a single trip. But a great idea in one man's hands doesn't change the world. It just makes one man rich. To rewire the planet, the box had to escape him. And that turned out to be the hard part, because everyone rushing into containers built their own. McLean's boxes were 35 feet long. His biggest rival used 24. Others wanted 17, or 27, or 40. And a box is only magic if it fits everything. Every crane, every truck, every train, every ship, in every port on Earth. A container that only fits one company's cranes isn't a revolution. It's just a bigger crate. So a quieter, unglamorous war was fought. Over dimensions, over corner fittings, over the exact twist lock that holds a stack of boxes together. Through the late 1960s, international standards bodies hammered it out and settled the world on two sizes, 20 feet and 40 feet. And in an act that shaped the modern economy more than most treaties, McLean's own company gave up its patent rights on the crucial locking mechanism, so the entire industry could use the same one. The inventor handed away the key and turned a box into a network. Then came the accelerant nobody planned for: war. In the mid-1960s, the American military in Vietnam was drowning, supplies rotting on overwhelmed docks, no way to move the mountain of material a war demands. In 1967, the Army turned to McLean's company, Sealand, and containerization proved itself at a scale no business could have funded. Vietnam alone came to generate around 40% of the company's revenue. And here's the quiet masterstroke. Rather than sail home empty across the Pacific, those ships stopped in Japan for cargo and lit the fuse on container trade between Asia and America. The box had found its destiny. Once moving a box across the world cost almost nothing, one rule of the entire economy quietly broke. Distance stopped mattering. If it's just as cheap to make something on the far side of the planet and ship it in a box, then that is exactly what the world will do. Factories scattered toward the cheapest labor on Earth. Asia stepped onto the global assembly line. The shelves of every big box store filled with goods that had crossed an ocean for pennies. The globalized economy you were born into, that isn't the internet's doing. Its physical skeleton is the shipping container. But every revolution has a body count, even the quiet ones. The box remade the map of the world, and it was merciless about who it left behind. The great finger piers of Manhattan and Brooklyn, too cramped for the vast paved yards a container port needs, simply went dark. San Francisco lost out to Oakland, London and Liverpool faded. And in their place, cities you'd never have picked rose to command global trade. Newark, Rotterdam, and a tiny island with almost no resources of its own, Singapore, that made itself one of the busiest ports on the planet. And the men who once ruled those docks? The longshoremen understood immediately what the box meant. That gangs of 20 could become cranes run by 2. One union leader, watching that first ship, growled that he'd like to sink it. They fought with strikes and bitter negotiations. But you cannot strike against arithmetic. An entire way of working, proud, dangerous, generations deep, was slowly folded up and put away, the human price of a cost that fell to almost nothing. Strip it back, and the container reveals a pattern you'll see again and again on this channel. And it's the opposite of what we're taught to expect. We tell ourselves the world is changed by dramatic things: wars, elections, brilliant inventions. But often the real engine is something almost insultingly dull. Not a better engine, a box. Not a discovery, an agreement that everyone's box would be the same box. Malcom McLean didn't invent a new technology. Steel boxes and cranes already existed. He invented a system and let the world standardize it until it disappeared into the background. And that's the secret. The things that truly reshape our lives are usually the ones we stop seeing. The box so ordinary you've walked past 10,000 of them and never once wondered where the world came from. Malcom McLean's own fortunes rose and crashed and rose again. Betting big never stops being betting. But when he died, in 2001, the industry he created gave him a farewell no general ever got. On the morning of his funeral, container ships all over the world sounded their horns at the same time. A planet's worth of steel boxes, saluting the truck driver who first asked, why not lift the whole thing? He reshaped the world not by force, but by subtraction, by removing the cost of distance itself. The whole improbable story, the man, the box, and the fight to shrink the world, is told in the book linked in the description. Next on Paper Empires, the box moved the world's goods for pennies, but every one of those goods was priced, paid for, and settled in a single nation's money. How did one country's currency quietly become the whole world's? That story is next. Subscribe, and I'll see you there.